All right, good afternoon to you, Fox 26 meteorologist Ramisha Shade. Let's talk about the tropics, in particular the Atlantic Basin. Of course, that's the Gulf, the Caribbean, and the Atlantic Ocean. We are fortunate for Houston, and we have almost made it through what is typically the busiest month of our hurricane season, September, without anything hitting us. So that is certainly some good news. However, it hasn't been that way for the entire Atlantic Basin. We've had now 9 named storms, starting off with Andrea closer to the beginning of the season, and now all the way down to Imelda, and 4 of these have become hurricanes. That would be Erin, Gabrielle, Humberto, and Imelda. 3 of those 4 hurricanes have been major. So Imelda is not major, but Humberto became a Cat 5 over the weekend. Gabrielle grew to a Cat 4. And of course, Erin earlier in the season blew up to a monster Cat 5. So next name on the list would be Jerry. Hopefully we won't have to deal with Jerry for a while, but of course the first few weeks of October can still be fairly busy. So we have made it up to 9 named storms, 4 hurricanes, 3 major hurricanes. Average season would bring us about 14 named storms, out of those 7 becoming hurricanes and 3 major hurricanes. So we have tied our average number of major hurricanes, but still a little behind for the named storms and the hurricanes. However, we could still end up having an average season because things can get busy in a hurry in the tropics. So we're still monitoring things closely. Not really seeing any signs of new development right now, but we're still closely tracking Hurricane Imelda and Hurricane Humberto, these systems that have been fairly close to each other almost the entire time. We were thinking at one point maybe they would absorb one or the other. They would kind of suck one of the others up, but that didn't happen. They've kind of stayed separate, maintained their own identity, and it looks like Imelda will continue to kind of batter parts of the southeastern U.S. coast with those big waves and the threat for those deadly rip currents. Humberto is farther out, so it's still contributing to some of those bigger waves on parts of the U.S. East Coast, but the impacts are a little bit less. So Humberto will likely push away and lose some of those tropical characteristics over the next day or two. Notice by 1 a.m. Wednesday, still a hurricane, but after that, it is expected to kind of get absorbed into a trough, and that will likely be the end of Humberto. So I think by Thursday, we can say goodbye to Humberto. We won't have to worry about it any longer, but still could bring some rain bands to parts of Bermuda over the next 24 to 36 hours. All right, let's switch gears and talk about Hurricane Imelda. And you can see some of the impacts here from what Imelda is doing for parts of the Florida East Coast, the Georgia coast, and up into the Carolinas. Look at the big waves coming in. This is a direct impact from Imelda. Even though it's not going to make a landfall for the U.S., it is close enough to bring that big surf, high surf advisories going on here, and also the threat for those dangerous rip currents. And we're looking at Daytona Beach, Florida. Not the best time to be in the water there. So hopefully folks are staying safe and staying out of the water. Not seeing anybody in this picture, so that is certainly some good news. As far as Imelda's strength, well, it is now a hurricane, and it could get a little bit stronger as we go into the next 24 hours. So Imelda bringing big waves from Florida to the Carolinas. Rip current risk continues for parts of the U.S. East Coast, and Bermuda is in the direct path of Imelda with hurricane warnings now in place. So that hurricane watch for Bermuda has now been upgraded to a hurricane warning. Here are some of the impacts for parts of the U.S. East Coast, from the Florida coast to the Carolinas. We've got that high surf advisory. So there will definitely be some big waves for folks to deal with. Hopefully, like I said, they're staying out of the water and staying safe. There is the hurricane warning, that area in red that we now have for the entire island of Bermuda. And it looks like Hurricane Imelda is going to roll right over Bermuda Wednesday evening through Thursday. So the tropical moisture associated with Humberto and Imelda will be impacting Bermuda, but the biggest impact is going to be from Imelda over the next few days. So both of these hurricanes are in the Category 1 wind speed. That would be 74 to 95 miles per hour. But remember, over the weekend, Humberto was a monster Cat 5, so it's got much weaker, and in a few days it'll be gone. So there's Imelda, there's Humberto, and we're going to track Hurricane Imelda as it rolls right over Bermuda late Wednesday, early Thursday, and the National Hurricane Center actually strengthening Imelda to a Category 2 just as it rolls over Bermuda. So I'm sure folks there are preparing for hurricane force winds, the threat for heavy rain, flooding, those big waves. After the end of the work week, it starts to race to the northeast and it will start to weaken and lose some of those tropical characteristics. So those are the only two systems that we have right now. Notice in the Gulf, water temps are still super warm, well into the 80s. We do have a weak area of low pressure in the west central Gulf, but at this point models are not really developing it into much, and if it does, it likely would be moving southwest away from the Texas Gulf Coast. All right, as far as formation zones, we made it to the end of September. You can still see an above average chance for tropical cyclones for pretty much the entire Atlantic basin. As we go into October, chance gets a little bit lower. Typically for Houston, if we don't get hit in the first 2 weeks of October, chances are very, very low that something of a tropical nature would come here towards the rest of October. So we're going to keep a close eye on things, but overall, every week we get through, our chances are going down. So that is good news. November, of course, the final month of hurricane season, and notice for the Gulf, there's a very low chance for tropical formation. If we get anything, it likely would be the western or central Atlantic or parts of the western, northwestern Caribbean. So we'll be watching it closely right now. After Imelda and Humberto are gone, nothing else at this point, but if we see something troublesome, of course, we're here every day. We'll let you know.